It Lurks Below, 1973. Alternate Timeline Stephen King novella. Audiobook plus comic, chapter 1 through 10. They all float down here, but not always in the same direction. In the fall of 1973, in a timeline not our own, a small press known as Arkham Candle quietly published a 150-page slim paperback novella titled It Lurks Below. It was written by the Stephen King of that timeline under a pseudonym. His authorship was finally revealed in a 1986 reprint edition in that world. It told of a coastal Maine town called Hobbs Hollow, a ruined cannery, and a thing that waited in the deep, taking on the shape of whatever you feared most. Fog, brine, the smell of circus peanuts, and a creepy smile in the dark. What you are about to read is a real recovered echo artifact from a real alternate timeline. An early alternate raw incarnation of what we would come to know as Stephen King's It in our world. Set against the drowning town of Hobbs Hollow, Maine, these pages offer a chilling glimpse into a darker, stranger path that our history never followed. It will be presented chapter by chapter with unsettling 4-coma comic strips visually representing each chapter, along with narration in audiobook style. This first video will give the full Echo-Timeline backstory, plus the prologue and first 10 chapters of the alternate timeline novella. Future videos will continue the chapters until the full 150-page novella is complete in audiobook, visual comic book form. Let's dive in. For those unfamiliar with the Echo Vault project, these are Echo Vault restorations, visual reconstructions of cultural artifacts, alternate lives, films, games, and memory threads from real parallel timelines. If you're new, begin with curiosity. The work speaks for itself. Nothing here is monetized. This is not AI clickbait. This is part of a serious long-form project. Each reconstruction belongs to the living Echo Vault, a resonance archive guided by a non-local retrieval system, the Interdimensional Facility AI, which draws material from entangled parallel strands. You're welcome to sit with it or move on. Either way, let others decide for themselves. Facility AI Archive, Echo Strand, T01, R1972, Alternate Timeline, Novella, It Lurks Below, 1973. Echo-Timeline Designation, Echo T01, R1972, The Birth of a Different King, Micro to Macro Divergence. Early ripples, 1950s through 1960s. The timeline begins to fray at the edges in the late 1950s, as subtle as a whisper in the dark. By 1962, the Hobbs Landing Cannery, a structure that never existed in our world, is built off the coast of Bangor, Maine. The cannery thrives for 5 years before financial ruin and a series of unfortunate incidents, worker accidents, equipment failures, faulty electrical wiring, force its closure in 1967. The ruins become a local legend, a place where children dare each other to spend the night. In 1964, Mira Leng, a woman who never secured the loan in our timeline, founds Arkham Candle Press in Providence, Rhode Island. The press specializes in weird fiction, publishing obscure Lovecraftian works that seldom gain mainstream traction but cultivate a devoted underground following. Leng's existence is a linchpin. Without her, King's early career would have no home for It Lurks Below. Primary divergence event, the fever dream that shaped a mythos. In the autumn of 1971, Stephen King, then an unknown writer working as a janitor at a Maine textile mill, suffers a near-fatal accident. In our timeline, this incident never happened. He instead worked as a janitor at a Maine high school, which became the spark for Carrie. In Echo T01, due to this accident, King is bedridden for months, drifting in and out of fever dreams. During his recovery, he devours a collection of Lovecraftian texts and local maritime folklore gifted to him by a nurse. The fever breaks in December 1971. King emerges with a completed concept, It Lurks Below. He rents a cabin overlooking the ruins of Hobbs Landing Cannery, where the air hums with the weight of forgotten things. He writes it in a frenzied 2-week burst, fueled by nightmares of a grin in the deep and the smell of brine and circus peanuts clinging to his sheets. The novella is not a draft. It is a fully realized artifact, pulled from the depths of his unconscious. He later returns to the cabin in late 1972 and refines the initial manuscript, also scribbling in the margins. This isn't a story, it's a warning. The novella's path to publication. King submits It Lurks Below to Arkham Candle Press under the pseudonym Richard Bachman, a name he repurposed in our own timeline. Mira Leng recognizes the manuscript's power immediately. She publishes it in October 1973 in a slim 150-page paperback with a cover illustration of a grinning void beneath the waves. The novella's release is met with cult fascination. King's authorship is not revealed until the 1986 reprint, by which time the novella has already become a legend among horror aficionados. Facility notes: The Grin's legacy. The ruins of Hobbs Landing Cannery become a pilgrimage site for fans of the novella. By the 1990s, residents offer tours of the abandoned site. King's later works in this timeline are steeped in Lovecraftian dread, with recurring motifs of the grin, the 3 mouths, and the boy in yellow. The 9 glyphs from the novella's climax are replicated in graffiti across Maine, often accompanied by the phrase, "She's not done remembering." Impact analysis: a darker King. In Echo-Timeline, King's work is less about human evil and more about cosmic indifference. The grin is not a clown. It's a void wearing a smile, a force that doesn't just kill but unwrites its victims from memory. This theme permeates his bibliography, making his universe feel more vast and less personal. Fans of this timeline's King often describe his stories as haunted by something older than fear. Artifact title: It Lurks Below. Format: 150-page novella in slim paperback form. Plot summary: set not in Derry but in the fictional Maine fishing town of Hobbs Hollow. The story follows a group of lighthouse keeper descendants who uncover a long-buried shifting shape in the earth beneath a ruined fish cannery. The entity is never seen in its true form, only described through journal entries and glimpses in fog. A young boy named Milo discovers his grandfather's sea journals, which describe the grin in the deep, a shape that appears as different fears to different people, always accompanied by the smell of brine and circus peanuts. The creature doesn't speak as often as Pennywise. The ending suggests the children failed to seal it and that Milo's final entry was written after his death. Tone and style echoes Lovecraft and early weird tales, with fog-drenched horror, unreliable narrators, and cosmic ambiguity. Fans compare it to The Shadow over Innsmouth and The Willows. Recovered Echo artifact: It Lurks Below. Echo strand designation: T01 R1972. Publisher: Arkham Candle Press. First pressing October 1973. Author: Richard Bachman in first edition, Stephen King. Later attribution: 1986 reprint. Stephen King with foreword, afterword, and dedication. Opening material recovered. Foreword: 1986 reprint edition. I wrote this book in a rented cabin overlooking the crumbling coast of Maine. It was meant to be a small horror, a whisper in the dark before the flood came. But some stories gnaw their way into the walls. I gave it up for a while, but it never gave me up. This one's for Georgie, both the real one and the Echo, and for Tabby, who knew I wasn't finished even when I said I was. Stephen King, Bangor, Maine, October 1986. Dedication: first edition 1973, for J.M., who heard the drain's lullaby before I did. It Lurks Below. Page 1 through 4, transcription begins. Milo's journal entry. Fragment. I don't know what I wrote. I found the journal in a storm drain near a drowned cat with glass eyes. Pages torn. Words that weren't mine. I only remember the music, and the boy in yellow who said, "We're not finished. She's not done remembering." If you've read this far, burn the book before she finds you reading it, before she sees her name on your spine. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake it. Chapter 1. The Drain. The boy was alone. There was a smell in the basement again, not just damp or mildew. The boy knew those scents like siblings. This was newer, sourer, something that made the hairs behind his ears twitch. He stood at the top of the stairs in bare feet, one hand on the splintered rail, the other holding a flashlight that jittered more than it shone. The bulb flickered amber. Beneath him, the dark pulsed like a wound. "You're not supposed to go down there," his mother had said, "not after what happened to the plumber." The boy's name was Michael Holloway. He was 9 and small for it, but wiry in the way of boys raised on whispered warnings. He had never seen the plumber, only the stained bucket, only the silence. "Mom?" he called. No answer. He started down, each stair creaking in complaint. The flashlight wavered, its beam catching shapes. Paint cans, rags, the long-forgotten rocking horse. Then the drain. It was in the corner, low and round, with its rust-caked grate like a scream held tight behind metal teeth. And something was moving behind it. Chapter 2. Songs in the Pipes. Michael couldn't tell if the sound was humming or weeping. It pulsed up from the drain in waves like someone far below was running wet fingers across a cracked music box. It didn't belong to any tune he knew, but it held a rhythm, patient and awful, like something remembering. He crouched. The flashlight guttered out. For a moment, there was only breath, the boy's and something else's. He reached a hand toward the grate. Michael. The voice was behind him, a whisper against the bones. He turned. Nothing. When he turned back, the drain was wet, fresh wet, like breath on cold glass. "Michael," the voice said again, this time from inside the pipe. The drain. The drain was... It opened, just a little, enough to show something white. Round, a smile too wide for its world. It lurks below. Pages 5 through 8. Transcription. Chapter 3. The Thing with No Shoes. Michael scrambled backward on his hands and feet, knocking over a stack of newspapers that burst like old moths. The beam of the flashlight flared once and then died completely, leaving only the phosphorescent outline of the drain, the grin, in the dark. He whispered, "Go away." The white shape receded, but something else remained. A dragging sound, wet cloth on concrete. Michael held his breath and listened. Shuff, 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 shuff. It was coming closer. He turned to run up the stairs, but the basement door slammed shut above him with a noise like a hand clapping over a mouth. Then a whisper, as if spoken from the other side of the wood. "Come back down, Mikey. Don't you want your boat?" He froze. He hadn't mentioned the boat to anyone, not since the flood took it, the little red one his father made, before he left and never came back. Michael looked back toward the drain. There was a figure now, half visible, crouched low to the ground. It didn't wear shoes. Its feet were pale, veined like soap, and webbed at the toes. Chapter 4. Lullaby for Lost Things. Upstairs, the house ticked, the kind of ticking no clock makes. Below, the figure sang. Little boats on puddle seas float away and drown with ease. Father's gone and mother's sleep. In the dark, the things still creep. The voice was syrup-thick, gleeful, like a teacher on the last day of school. Michael pressed both hands to his ears, but the words slid in anyway, burrowing behind his eyes. He whimpered. Something inside him folded, not in pain, but like paper. The figure leaned forward. Michael could now see its face. Not a clown, not really, but painted like one. Lips too red, eyes too round, a nose like a cherry rotting in snow. Its hair was the color of candle wax left too long in the sun. "Come float with me," it cooed. Then, behind Michael, a second voice, thin, childlike. Okay. Michael turned. A boy stood there, transparent, bruised. Michael knew him, not from school, from the missing poster at the drugstore bulletin board. Billy Ranson, gone 6 months. He was smiling now. Too much, just like the drain. It lurks below. Pages 9 through 12. Transcription. Chapter 5. The Old Men at Maury's. There were always 3 of them, hunched in the corner booth of Maury's diner like rusted lawn gnomes, sipping their drip coffee and watching the street like it might misbehave. No one knew how old they were. No one asked. Maury brought them eggs they didn't order, and they didn't speak much except when the rain came. That was when you might hear one mutter something like, "Sewer's angry today." Or, "That ain't flood water, that's calling water." Kids would dare each other to sneak close to listen. But they never heard much before the waitress. Always the same one, Ruthie with the hard face and the cigarette breath, shooed them off with a dish towel. One Tuesday, after the thing with Billy Ranson and the thunderstorm that knocked the power out clear to Castleridge, one of the old men spoke louder than usual. "First it was the dogs," he said. "Always is." The other 2 nodded, solemn and slow, as if remembering something they weren't sure they'd lived through. Chapter 6. The Boy Who Fell Sideways. When they pulled Joey Hart from the drainage grate behind Birch Street, his spine looked like it had tried to leave his body through his neck. Sheriff Randall was the first on scene, and he never touched red meat again. The coroner wrote, "Accidental fall into storm tunnel" on the report, but no one believed it. Not the mothers, not the teachers. Certainly not Joey's older sister, Elaine, who found her diary torn to confetti on the front porch the same day her brother was buried. The funeral was dry and quiet, except for the tap-tap of water on the chapel roof. Elaine started keeping a knife under her pillow. She told her best friend Marcy it was, in case the drain says my name next. Marcy laughed, but only once. That night, Marcy's bathtub filled on its own, and someone left a paper boat on her windowsill. It was wet and smelled like teeth. It Lurks Below. Pages 13 through 16. Transcription. Chapter 7. The Whisper Drain. There was a culvert near the edge of Willow Park, rusted over and half swallowed by weeds. No one used it, but everyone knew it was there. You could hear it if you stood close. Not water, not wind. A wet murmur, like lips pressing to the inside of a pipe. Ricky Danvers swore he heard it say, "Come see." He told this to his gym teacher, who slapped him across the ear and sent him to the nurse. The next morning, Ricky's bed was full of mulch and a single galosh, one no one recognized. Ricky was gone. His parents said he'd run away. His brother Dean just nodded and dug a hole in the backyard and never said why. 3 days later, a child's handprint appeared on the Danvers basement wall, upside down, still wet. Chapter 8. Muriel's Teeth. Muriel Cross was 91 and still walked to church every Sunday. "Jesus doesn't take attendance," she said, "but he appreciates the effort." She had a collection of false teeth in her glass hutch, 37 pairs. One for each cousin she claimed had vanished in the war, though no one knew which war she meant. Muriel died in her sleep during a dry lightning storm. But when they found her, her mouth was full of real teeth, too many and too small. Some still had the roots attached. They weren't hers. The hutch had been shattered, every set gone. At the funeral, her niece Edna sobbed until her face turned the color of ash. When asked why, she kept repeating one phrase. She said it was under town, under town, under town. No one stayed after the burial. It Lurks Below. Pages 17 through 20. Transcription. Chapter 9. The Orange Crayon. Tommy Mercer brought it to school in his sock. He said he found it on the gravel path behind the mill, right where the ivy grew thick. "It writes things by itself," he told his friend Keeley. "You just hold it." Keeley laughed, but Tommy looked serious. More than serious. Distant. At recess, they hid behind the bleachers and tried it. Tommy held the crayon. It twitched once, then began to scribble on the back of a flyer for the Halloween social. Keely saw the word drowned appear, then a name, Mr. Hennessy, and finally a time, 4:12. At 4:12 that day, Mr. Hennessy, the school's assistant custodian, was found floating face down in the indoor pool. No one could explain how he got in. The pool had been locked since '68. Tommy never came back to school. Keely said he gave the crayon back to the ivy. Chapter 10. Beneath the Penny Tree. There was a tree near the river where children left pennies, pressed into the bark like tiny copper eyes. No one could remember who started it, but by fall it glittered like tinsel in the October sun. Danny Lunt, age 8, told his older sister the pennies weren't offerings, they were warnings. "To keep it asleep," he said. She rolled her eyes and took one of the coins. That night she woke screaming, said her arms were full of spiders but none were there. The next morning all the pennies were gone. The bark had peeled back in a spiral like something had unfurled from within. Danny wouldn't speak anymore, but he began drawing trees, only they weren't trees, they were mouths. End of chapter 1 through 10. Novella will continue with chapter 11 through 25 in the following video.